speak out. My name is Chris Fan and I'll be your MC this afternoon. So on this slide, it says, please introduce yourself in the chat, include your name, pronouns, and if you're part of an organization, your organization as well. And can we go to the next slide, please? Before we start, just the speak out protocols. I'm gonna read through this real quick. One, to minimize noise, everyone is currently muted. If you have any questions or you want to cheer on our amazing lineup of speakers, please use the chat and we'll make sure that we are able to respond and pick up that energy and channel it into the rest of the afternoon. This webinar is being live streamed on social media, just an FYI. And if you are posting on social media, please use the hashtag support the Filipino people in struggle so that we can track, right, our movement building and this energy that we're building this afternoon. Right, so those are community speak out or community guidelines. Before we move on, I would like to say a few words before we introduce our lineup of speakers. But it's very exciting to see that from across the United States, we're here alongside with people across the globe. Right now, today is the day of action, calling for the solidarity with the Filipino people struggle for just and lasting peace, right? We are linking arms with people across the globe, right? Looking at and supporting the Filipino people and waging their struggle for liberation, a struggle which can only be achieved by adhering to the demands of the aspirations of the Filipino people, and as such, by genuinely addressing the root causes of armed conflict. Historically, the last week of August 1896 signaled the turning point when Filipinos openly refused Spanish colonial dominion over the Philippines and formally declared the separation from Spanish colonial rule through a nationwide armed revolution. This cry for freedom from the Spaniards was dubbed as the cry of Pugadlawin. Today, the Filipino people are continuing the cry for liberation and the struggle for genuine democracy. So every day, more and more Filipinos are taking up the life and death struggle for their own liberation. And every day, the Filipino people are more often than not met with displacement, illegal arrest, and bullets, right? So next slide, please. I would like to bring attention to the murder of attorney Rex Fernandez, a human rights lawyer that was shot and killed this afternoon. Attorney Rex was a founding member of the National Union of People's Lawyers and served as a legal counsel for Karapatan for years. This regime has made this month bloody. And Attorney Rex is joined by countless other people killed in August, right? Randall Aljanis, Kian de los Santos, Carl Arnanis, Reynaldo Gulate Guzman, Zara Alvarez, and those massacred in the Intique Siete. So before we continue, let us have a moment of silence for those who have committed their lives to the liberation of the Filipino people. Thank you. So why are we here? We are exposing the Duterte regime, the US-Duterte regime, as the true terrorist perpetuating and perpetrating the worst kind of state terrorism against the broad masses of the Filipino people. We are here exposing Duterte evading the path of genuine peace and taking the path of terroristic fascist rule. We are exposing the United States of America as the main supporters and enactors of state terrorism in the Philippines. The work and the lives of countless people martyred will not go in vain, but will serve as fuel for more and more people around the world, you and me, all of us, to take up the struggle for liberation and genuine democracy in the Philippines and stand in solidarity with the Filipino struggle. We call upon the international community who stand in support of the Filipino people's struggle for people's rights, social justice, and national democracies to join us in our demand to pursue genuine peace and to end state terroristic repression. We, as part of the international community that stands in support of the Filipino people's rights, cannot be silent or docile to this onslaught of terroristic repression by the US-Duterte regime. So long live international solidarity. And with that being said, I would like to first introduce Nadia from the Palestinian Youth Movement. Take it away, Nadia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for hosting us and for inviting us in to speak. It's an honor to go first and to speak to you all today. The Palestinian Youth Movement stands in unequivocal solidarity with the people of the Philippines against Duterte's fascist military regime. As Palestinians, we understand how notions of security and derailing of terrorism are ways to suppress national liberation movements and to distort the narrative of resistance against occupiers and neo-colonial neoliberal regimes. Duterte's anti-terror bill serves as a means to further arrest and detain political activists, as the number of political prisoners has increased during the pandemic. And in the last year and a half, we know that the Duterte administration has further escalated its repression of the basic human rights of the Filipino people, including the criminalization of community activists, as you mentioned. We stand in full support of the Filipino people in struggle. We demand an end to red tagging and liberation and dignity for the people and by the people. Thank you for mentioning Rex Fernandez and all of those who have paid the ultimate price for the liberation of the people. We demand justice and freedom. Free the land, free the people from dictatorship and economic repression. We look to you, we stand with you here as folks in the diaspora who are committed to uplifting national liberation and national aspirations for our people. And we also are here in solidarity for any way that we can help people on the ground struggle and fight back against Duterte and the US Duterte fascist regime and US imperialism. We are inspired by your movements every day. The terrain is very difficult, but we are here and we are committed to keep going. Thank you. Until liberation, until freedom, until justice for all who are struggling under repression from the state.
Thank you, Nadia, for your words. And like you said, the human rights situation is escalating. The terroristic fascist attacks on the people are escalating. Of course, with the anti-terror law, red tagging, terror tagging people have been legislated under the current regime. And we're just days, it's been days since Duterte himself has announced that he'll be running for vice president in the upcoming elections, right? Keeping hold of his role. And if he's not running for vice president, he will secede only if his daughter, Sarah Duterte, will run. No. So we see that we must, right, rise up with the Filipino people, especially in their calls to oust Duterte and remove him. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Bill Fletcher, a journalist and a former president of Trans-Africa Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, and I very much appreciate it. I'm honored to speak this afternoon on this. So we in the United States have a special obligation, as far as I'm concerned, with regard to the Philippines, given our historical relationship. The United States launched a genocidal war against the Philippines in 1899, killing at least 1 million Filipinos, thereby frustrating the efforts at national independence and sovereignty. The US kept the Philippines as both a colony and later as a neo-colony, and has propped up one repressive regime after another. What we're looking at today is terror unleashed by the Duterte regime, a terror that's conducted in the name of fighting crime and then later fighting communists. This is a terror of extrajudicial violence against the opponents of the regime, but it's also the terror of what I'd call global silence. Duterte can only do what he does because of US support and because of global silence, a global silence that takes the form of the shrugging of shoulders by many, many people, feeling that there's nothing that they can do, and therefore, why even raise the issue? We must speak out today, but we need to actually do more than speak out. We need more than rallies. We need a broad global campaign for peace, justice, and freedom for the Philippines, a campaign that squeezes the regime, isolates it, and makes it increasingly difficult for the regime to pretend that there's anything called normality in the Philippines. This is not about begging. This is about organizing and insisting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill Fletcher, for your pointed words, right? Your call to action for the building the solidarity movement for the people struggle in the Philippines. We must organize. We must put the conversation of the Philippines on the dining room table so that more and more people are able to speak about this and are able to take action, right? So thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on to our next speaker, Tabitha from Malaya Movement USA. Go ahead, Tabitha.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone who came before me. I'm Tabitha with the Malaya Movement USA National Executive Committee. I wanted to start off with a quote by Andres Bonifacio, a Filipino revolutionary, who said, "Reason teaches us that we must be united in will, united in thought, and that we might have strength to search out the reigning evil in our nation. This is the time for the light of truth to surface. This is the time for us to show that we have our own sentiments, have honor, have shame, and have solidarity." And so I thank you all for your incredible show of solidarity with the Filipino people's struggle today and every day as we remain united in will and action to fight for a Philippines rid of oppression and exploitation. This week, 124 years ago, the Filipino people rose up against the Spanish Empire in the form of the Philippine Revolution, led by the Katipunan. The cry of Pugadlawin, forever etched in our history, signaled the ongoing commitment to fighting against the oppressors of our people. Back then, those we now know as revolutionaries, like Bonifacio, were deemed as rebels, as bandits, and ultimately as traitors by the Philippine government under Aguinaldo, who ordered Bonifacio's execution. Philippine history books and the government now paint the Katipunan and Bonifacio as revolutionaries who were on the right side of history all along. These days, the same tactic is used by the Duterte regime against everyday activists, against progressive individuals and organizations like ours, and against revolutionaries who have sought to rid the reigning evil in our nation. The state does this from Aguinaldo to Duterte because they are terrified of the power of the people who come together and are united in will and in thought to seek out a truly just and peaceful Philippines, fighting to be on the right side of history. We know that activism is not terrorism. The number of those killed keep climbing, from the war on drugs to these state-sanctioned murders of activists, to the complete and utter failure of the government's response to COVID. This merciless regime is hell-bent on making the lives of the Filipino people as difficult as possible. And for us here in the United States, in the belly of the beast, we must recognize our role in this bloodshed. For millions and millions of our tax dollars have gone on to arm this murderous tyrant. It is critical that as we come together today in solidarity with the Filipino people's struggle, that we must commit to action. Continue to push your legislators to support the Philippine Human Rights Act to end US military aid to the Duterte regime. Continue to organize and continue to build a movement against fascist state repression. Expose these crimes against the Filipino people and end the Duterte regime. Wakasan na ang rehimeng Duterte. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabitha. Right, we must commit to taking action abroad, right? And a concrete way that Tabitha mentioned is supporting the Philippine Human Rights Act campaign, lobbying your legislators, building the power of your constituents in your respective congressional districts. Yeah, and for the folks that are rolling in, we're at 72 people or 73 people right now. We're here speaking out and calling on the international community to rise up in solidarity with the Filipino people's struggle, right, in their fight for national liberation and genuine democracy. And we're going to backtrack to the previous speaker, Frank Chapman, the executive director of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. Thank you so much.
First of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I On behalf of the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression, we are honored to have this opportunity to stand in unconditional solidarity with the Filipino people in their long and historic struggle for democracy. In fact, this is the longest anti-imperialist struggle in the world. It's been going on since the Spanish-American War. And also, as part of the Black Liberation Movement, I want to say that there's also a long historic tradition of solidarity between the Filipino people and the Black people in the United States. We stand in unconditional solidarity with the Filipino people, and we also stand opposed to President Duterte, who has designated as terrorists any organization or personality aligned with the democratic struggle of the Filipino people. We join in the Filipino people's struggle in their call for a just and lasting peace based on the democratic demands of the people being met. We also call upon President Biden and our government to cease and desist in supporting President Duterte and his regime of state repression. We unite with the statements that people have made previously. This is a fascist dictatorship. And all people up throughout the world who love democracy and who are fighting for freedom are joined in united struggle with the Filipino people against this fascist dictatorship. Long live international solidarity.
Thank you, Frank. Right, you mentioned the long historic relationship and solidarity amongst different people's struggles, including the Black liberation struggle here in the US and the Philippines dating back from the Philippine-American War. No, and we must carry on the tradition or the legacy and continue to build, right? Continue to organize, continue to talk about and raise the analysis of the Philippines. The next speaker is in the form of a video. We have a wonderful video from the Washington Senator Rebecca Saldana, and that will show right now. Thank you.
Greetings, my name is Rebecca Saldana. Since May, I have served as a sub-commissioner for Investigate PH, an independent investigation into human rights violations in the Philippines, which just released the second of 3 reports detailing how under current President Rodrigo Duterte, the justice system in the Philippines participates in suppressing dissent, both by weaponizing the law to facilitate human rights abuses and by failing to enforce legal protection. In the last 5 years, over 30,000 people have been killed, hundreds arrested on false charges under President Duterte's regime. Last year, he signed the anti-terror bill into law, a law that impacts not only Filipino citizens speaking out against the violence and human rights attacks, but also our own American citizens residing here in Washington, in my state of Washington, where I am a state senator. Within my tenure in the state legislature, very similar legislation has been introduced, but thankfully has not advanced further than introduction. As a prime sponsor of the Washington State Voting Rights Act, I understand that our democracy is fragile and depends on us as people and as elected officials to make sure it is rooted in our commitment to freedom of speech, access to voting, and upholding civil rights. I also recall the history of Seattle Filipino labor leaders who were assassinated for speaking out against the Marcos dictatorship in 1981. For these reasons, I stand with and implore you to do the same in standing against human rights violations and to uphold our democracy. thank you, and solidarity.
Send our thanks to Senator Rebecca Saldana. And really, even in this current country, there is resistance happening at the Senate level, in the House of Representatives, right? Because it's undeniable what is happening in the Philippines under the current US-Duterte regime. It's undeniable how much the Filipino people have faced just for fighting for their liberation, just for fighting for their livelihoods. And with that being said, we're going to transition to a video. It was made during the Gloria Macapagal Arroyo regime, another notorious regime that killed so many people and really propped up and further emboldened the relationship between the US and the Philippines. Go ahead, thank you.
Government has allowed this, and so this is our song for the U.S. troops in the Philippines. You'll know what we mean when we get to the chorus part. I see without your warships, a land without your tanks, a sky without your warplanes, where doves are free to fly. This is the peace we want, the place we long to live in. This is the life we long to be. A playground for our children, but not your war game zone. Clothing, food, and shelter, not your bullets and bombs. This is the peace we want, the place we want to live in. This is the life we long to be. So go home now, go home now. You leave us alone. Go home now, go home now. Bring your arms along. Women free from violence, and they are slaves no more. Singing songs of freedom and not wailing in pain. This is the peace we want, the place we long to live in. This is the life we long to be. So go home now, go home now. You leave us alone. Go home now, go home now. Bring your arms along. So go home now, go home now. You leave us alone. Go home now, go home now. Bring your arms along. This is the peace we want, the place we want to live in. This is the life we long to be.
Thank you to our tech team that is currently showing our videos and screen sharing to us and making it possible to show these videos that show the intimate realities, of what is happening in the Philippines, in the urban centers, in the countryside for the vast majority of the Filipino people. So next, we'll have our next speaker is John Parker from the Organizing Committee of Struggle La Lucha. Take it away.
Hi, it's an honor to be a part of this important webinar. When the Vice President Kamala Harris went to Guatemala representing the reactionary wishes of Biden, it reminded me of what is going on in the Philippines by the reactionary Duterte regime today. In her disrespectful address to the people of Guatemala, she did not mention the history of US plunder and death, nor the justification for the death squads of official military and paramilitary forces that slaughtered whole communities. That justification is the same justification used to shoot down Black and brown people here in the US. Hillary Clinton called Black men super predators and the people of Libya and Iraq terrorists, all to justify a war against the people over there and over here, so the US could maintain its profits and super exploitation. The people's fight back in Guatemala included the assistance to the basic needs of the poorest communities there, providing medical and social services denied by the corrupt US-sponsored governments. And in this month of August, the Duterte regime continued the targeting of revolutionaries whose main tasks also included the education, cultural, and medical work among poor communities made up of laborers of the land. Their work included the vital work of preventing infections from COVID-19 in places where there were no medical facilities. Of this grouping, 19 revolutionaries were killed by an airstrike which used US-made weapons. These forces of revolution, whether they come from organizations providing self-defense of the people or organizations solely providing for immediate social necessities, they are a vital force to end misery and US hegemony through puppets like Duterte. All are being mislabeled as terrorists. And this is right from the US playbook of disinformation. Remember, Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress were labeled terrorists by the Reagan administration, and that label remained throughout the Clinton administrations and Bush administration. And we must not allow this tactic to justify any more funding wars of terror against our international family. Already since 2002, about $2 billion have been spent for that purpose in the Philippines by the United States. Our Filipino comrades and family are calling for an end to the US funding of the Duterte regime. That aid from the US is not going for social needs of the Filipino people. It goes towards the institutions of state terror, the police and military. The increased funding of weapons of terror coincide almost perfectly with the dramatic rise of the US military budgets started by the Carter administration, justifying the wars of the Reagan, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and the funding of the endless wars the US is still engaged in. Yes, even still in Afghanistan. Those weapons used to kill the people of Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, and Palestine eventually wind up being used on the streets of South Central California or Harlem, New York. And there's a direct relation between the terror and oppression of the US creates overseas to that which is going on right here in the belly of the beast. One feeds the other, one facilitates the other, which means that if we combat the terror and oppression over there, we are also challenging the oppression and terror right here. For example, when the Communication Workers of America went on strike at Verizon, their counterparts in the Philippines went on strike in solidarity so as not to be made scabs. And likewise, when the ports were shut down here to stop the flow of arms or supplies to Israel, that afforded that same booster shot of optimism and strength to the Palestinian and Iraqi working class. We must convince our union family here in the US to become more involved in throwing their wrenches or any tools they wield into the imperialist machinery that threatens the lives and livelihoods of our family in the Philippines. We need more solidarity strikes to support the revolutionary struggle in the Philippines. We must do more to highlight the funds for death and fascist military groupings in the Philippines, taking orders from whomever is in the White House, and do more to highlight those links to our own oppression here in the US. The more we unite our struggles here for social justice, the more that is possible. And we must push the demands for no more funding to Duterte and for the immediate removal from the US terrorist list of any Filipino organizations representing the people's struggles for liberation, and especially demand that revolutionary writer and Filipino activist, Professor Jose Maria Sison, be removed from that list. Long live international solidarity, and thank you again.
Thank you, John. Long live international solidarity, and thank you for your thorough statement about the interrelations between the struggle in the Philippines and also the struggle here in the US between all being oppressed under the current imperialist system. No? So for the folks that are rolling in and also are watching on social media, we're here speaking out, right, and calling on the international community to rise up in solidarity with the Filipino people's struggle for national liberation and genuine democracy. Right here, we are joined with amazing speakers expressing solidarity and linking struggles with the Filipino people. And next, we have Benjamin Padro from the Unión del Barrio, who will be speaking next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, comrades. On behalf of Unión del Barrio, please receive a revolutionary support salute to the National Democratic Forces of the Philippines currently in struggle against the fascist Duterte regime and for your national liberation. Unión del Barrio, an anti-imperialist and socialist Mexican organization committed to the struggle for a socialist Mexico and a united Latin America, or what we refer to as Nuestra America, recognize the struggle of the Filipino people as a struggle against colonialism, capitalism, and US imperialism. Our struggle parallels each other's, having been colonized by the Spanish monarchy over 500 years ago and having been occupied by the settler colonial government of the United States under the doctrines of Manifest Destiny during their expansionist war on Mexico in 1848, and what is expressed today as a policy of US expansionism under the doctrine of American exceptionalism. Today, our people suffer terrible conditions and are conditions of forced migration as a consequence of centuries of colonial and capitalist exploitation. We're here to express our solidarity with the Filipino people who are suffering the consequences of US imperialist policy, utilizing the Philippines as a forward operating base for which to control the geopolitical region of the Asian continent. With tremendous natural resources and masses of Filipino people subject to labor exploitation. With tremendous natural resources and the masses of Filipinos subject to labor exploitation, the Duterte regime has committed his administration to support the multinational corporations that keep Philippines functioning as a source of cheap labor. And in order for the Duterte to maintain that submissive role, he has used brutal US-sponsored military rule like the previous neo-colonial administrators, such as the Marcos regime. Arbitrary arrest, extrajudicial killings, and repression against democratic forces and the general population constitute a terrorist regime, and we stand with the Filipino people to overturn this repressive regime. Unión del Barrio stands with the Filipino people struggle for lasting peace in the Philippines. We support the democratic forces who have waged heroic struggles to end the Duterte fascist rule and who have promoted the right of the Filipino masses for self-determination, social justice, and national democracy. End to the US-backed Duterte regime and state terrorism. Long live the struggle for lasting peace in the Philippines. Long live international solidarity.
Thank you, Benjamin. Right, you and the other speakers have really tracked back on the true intentions of the United States, right, in maintaining power over a geographical region in Asia Pacific, and maintaining the economic interests, right, and using the Philippines as a pawn and as a lily pad for the narrow interests of the US empire, right? And what really the Filipino people are fighting for is sovereignty, to have to flex their right over the matters of their country. No. So next and last but not least, we have Nina Macapinlac, the Deputy Secretary of Bayan US, the first and largest overseas chapter of Bagong Alyansang Makabayan or Bayan, the campaign center of the National Democratic Struggle of the Philippines. Take it away, Nina.
Warm and militant greetings, everyone. We are so happy to be with you all today and are moved by your heartfelt solidarity. Today's event is in response to the call of the Friends of the Filipino People and Struggle, or FFPS, a global solidarity organization supporting the National Democratic People's Movement in the Philippines. As Bayan USA, we extend a huge thank you to FFPS and everyone who's joined us today. To all the peace-loving people who are not Filipino or from the Philippines, but see our struggle as your own. to be going against the grain of global silence, as Bill Fletcher has articulated so well. The role of international solidarity for the movement against state terror in the Philippines is vital. Historically, the support of the international community in the 80s was critical to the successful ouster of dictator Ferdinand Marcos. Your solidarity and ability to see our struggle, a struggle of an oppressed and colonized people, as inseparable from the struggle of the people in the US and around the world, is part of what make revolutions and system change possible. And we from the ND movement call on more people to join the Friends of the Filipino People and struggle and build the solidarity movement for the national liberation of the Philippines. We condemn the Duterte government's designation of National Democratic Revolutionary Forces, the Communist Party of the Philippines, the New People's Army, the National Democratic Front of the Philippines as terrorist organizations and demand their immediate delisting. Every week, there are new developments of comrades and community leaders being killed, incarcerated, and wrongly tagged as terrorists, when the real terrorists are US imperialists and local reactionary fascists like Duterte. As mentioned earlier, there were 19 martyrs who were just killed this past August 16 in Samar at the hands of the US-supported armed forces of the Philippines using US-made guns. They were killed by aerial strafing, which is reckless and kills children and unarmed civilians. The state is desperate to quell the people's righteous struggle for national liberation because the national democratic movement has been the most united and formidable political force in the Philippines for more than half a century. In their desperation, they have even terror tagged legal mass organizations and formations like Bayan, demonized, killed, and incarcerated legal activists. But we must ask why? Why? Because the National Democratic Movement has provided a real socialist alternative to a system that produced Duterte and those who came before him in the first place. Because the masses of people can no longer live under the brunt of imperialism, bureaucrat capitalism, and feudalism. And the National Democratic Movement reflects their aspirations for justice, a dignified life, and genuine peace. The fascist state is brutal and cold, but we must remember that it is also cowardly and weak. It knows that they do not stand a fighting chance on the ground against revolutionaries who are much more committed politically and ideologically to the freedom of their people. With every fallen revolutionary, 100 more will sprout up. Our martyrs will live on forever because we will continue to organize our communities in every corner of the world until the Philippines is truly free. Maki baka, wag matakot. Dare to struggle, do not be afraid. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for your agitating speech, right? And reflecting on what the Filipino people are fighting for, right? And what they are facing, however, the resolve to move forward and their unity to push forward with the people of the world to fight, right, this fascist regime and end the US controls and shackles of the Philippine nation, all entwined with also the US empire, right, the fall of the US empire. So that is our last speaker, and thank you all to our wonderful speakers and everyone here on the Zoom and watching on social media. Even in the thick of the pandemic, we're here to link arms and rise up in solidarity with the people's movement in the Philippines, right here and now. Even though we are a few people, we represent several hundred people behind us and beside us, right? While we are organizing, politicians, legislators are arguing and debating on how to maintain the control of the Asia Pacific. And in the Philippines, they are shuffling around political players in this upcoming election, while the people are actually addressing the concrete conditions and providing services and addressing the concrete needs of the vast majority of the people, right? So let us carry on with our organizing. It is our duty, especially here in the United States, to take action and elevate the solidarity movement for the people struggle in the Philippines to the next level. We must amplify the stories of struggle and victory of the Filipino people. Filipino people have no other choice but to organize their communities, their workplaces, their schools, their barrios, have no other choice but to take up the call for liberation and genuine democracy, whether it's on the streets or in the countryside. We know that there are people that are relying on us to amplify the call and rise up in solidarity. So there are really concrete ways for you to participate, right? Alongside all of the calls that were presented today by wonderful speakers, there is a week of action from September 18th to the 24th. So September 18th, there is a summit that the Malay Movement USA will be convening that is open. On the 20th, Investigate PH, which was mentioned by Senator Rebecca Saldana, is having a webinar. On the 21st is the anniversary of martial law under a dictatorship in the 1970s and 80s, right? Hit up your local organizations to find out what the activities are. And then from the 22nd, 24th, nationally, we'll be lobbying our legislators to cut the US military aid from the Philippines by passing the Philippine Human Rights Act. Again, thank you so much, international solidarity, and we hope to see you again in our upcoming events locally and also across the nation. Thank you.
Thank you.